Welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. We are coming off the heels of a recent primary election in Bloomington. I have with me today the Republican recommended candidate for mayor of Bloomington, Ryan Kulka, who came away the first place vote getter overall in that primary. Describe that night for us. Describe that whole process. Describe who you are, too.
Yeah, it was an amazing night. We had a get together at the North Star Tavern and just rallied a bunch of supporters up there at a local, Bloomington bar and restaurant here, and just to see how the primary vote was going to shake out. And I was relatively confident that I was going to make it through the primary into the top two, but I had no expectation that I would get the most votes in the primary election, and so when the final numbers shook out, it was about 50 or 60 people in the room, just ecstatic, and the feeling was just an amazing rush of adrenaline and support, and I was able to get up and give a small speech in front of everybody, and I feel like people just felt like they were a part of something, and it was awesome. It was a great feeling.
So now you and one other candidate move on to the November election, Ryan. And for those of our audience who did not see the last episode you were on the Republican Roundtable, who are you? What's your background? I know a lot of people didn't expect for you to be the overall first place vote getter because we had some other kind of more established candidates in the race. What makes your background unique to Bloomington 1 and to this mayoral position 2?
Yeah, I believe I'm unique because I've been here my whole life, and that's something my opponent can't say. I'm really in tune with Bloomington and the community. I have a large network here, not only business contacts, but personal contacts and friends. Mm-hmm. And most of my family is in Bloomington too, including my grandparents and my parents. So it's kind of crazy to sort of be a Cinderella story, somebody coming out of nowhere and getting involved in this election. But I believe it's really resonating with the citizens and the residents of Bloomington to have an option for them. That's somebody that's going to really be able to relate to them and hear their voice and be able to represent the voice of the citizens of Bloomington as mayor of this city. And I think that's really what the sentiment is and what people want.
And I think people do want that. There's this tendency, especially in Bloomington, and a lot of our viewers will be able to attest to this, that candidates are kind of chosen or groomed, or you need to be part of city government and the apparatus in order to kind of advance. You had a forum last night against your opponent, Tim Bussey, in this November election. Mm-hmm. What were some of the hot button issues that have been touched on in this campaign?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was an interesting scenario because it was the first forum that we had that was sort of just me and Tim. All the other forums have been a panel of all the other city council reps that are involved in races right now. So it was a unique experience. I thought it was really well run. There was a lot of time devoted towards audience questions. So the subjects ranged.
You got to really hear it, huh?
Yeah. The subjects ranged from who are your campaign donors to how do you feel about the water park at Mall of America. So it was great to be able to speak to all of those issues, from social issues to equity issues to business and financial issues, sort of mano-a-mano against the opponent.
And we'll get into issues specifically in a little bit, mm-hmm. Ryan, but thematically, what do you think is the biggest differentiators between you and a guy like Tim Bussey?
Mm-hmm. Well, to your point earlier, people do feel like candidates are chosen and groomed, and that maybe that the residents and the citizens' votes don't really matter in these municipal elections, and we can tell that by the voter turnout. It's typically pretty low. So I am all about getting new people out to the polls, and I think we saw that in the primary election. We're going to see it here in the general election again, and I'm very excited about that. I represent new, fresh perspectives and ideas and change and a new Bloomington, sort of revitalizing Bloomington and being responsible. So I think that's the biggest differentiator between, let's not just keep things status quo and in the manner and on the track that it was going, and let's get some new, fresh ideas in here. It's time for Bloomington to become more relevant again.
And I think, to your point, there's a lot of things that people like about Bloomington, and it's keeping those things, but still saying, hey, there's a bunch of opportunity here in a bunch of different areas, right?
Right.
To improve upon our current situation.
Yeah, I said it last night. I'm not about revolution. I'm not about stopping the things that are working well in Bloomington. I'm actually about educating more people about all the great services that Bloomington offers, and being more transparent and getting more people involved in those things and knowing that these resources exist. But then also I'm about evolution, and getting us to the next level and make sure that we're set up well for the future and that we're a relevant city here in the Twin Cities that people want to do business in, they want to raise families in, and they want to come here because we have great restaurants, bars, business scenes, entertainment scenes that they can enjoy with their friends and family.
One of the biggest issues that I think have dictated this election, even up to your primary, was the Valley View Park situation. And I know your own vote count, you got the most votes as a percentage base in the areas where Valley View Park and this whole community center has been kind of bantered about. That is one really distinguishing issue between you and your opponent, Ryan. What is that issue? There seems to be this community center debate that's happening. They want to get rid of Valley View Park, which seems to be a pretty beloved park in Bloomington, and put up a community center, a multi-million-dollar community center. Am I missing anything about that, or can you help educate our audience on that issue in particular?
Yeah, this came up last night and actually last week in the forum as well. And I think there's two issues when it comes to the community center. I've talked to a lot of residents in that area, and I think that's why I did so well in that area for the primary election. And the two issues are the where and the how much. And the residents that live around Valley View and the citizens of Bloomington are really concerned about the where. And the city is really concerned about the how much. And there's a big gap there. And so it comes down to transparency between city officials, city council, city staff, and the residents of Bloomington to say, hey, we hear you on this where thing. We're going to try to figure this out responsibly when it comes to the finances, but the city is not doing a good job at hearing the voices of the people when it comes to the where. So I have my own concerns about the how much, because to your point, to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars to build a Taj Mahal-esque community center. And believe me, I'm all for community centers in the city of Bloomington. I think right now is a great time to be having that conversation. And Creekside's falling apart. The infrastructure is really bad over there, and I think Bloomington deserves and needs a new community center. But we have to be responsible with our dollars when it comes to how much we're spending, and we need to listen to the people about where this should be, because the residents that live around Valley View are very upset.
It seems that way. Another issue that was touched on at this forum was the water park issue. And I know you and I talked about that during the last episode, but it seems that the conversation has picked up even more since then. What is that all about? It seems like the Mall of America is getting a bunch of government money to implement a new water park when they have one 200, 300 yards away right now.
Yeah, that's a really hot button issue, and there's been a lot of new information that's come out about that. A couple weeks ago, Lee Schaefer, he's a columnist for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, sat in on a session with those that were involved as far as 555 and the city of Bloomington and the Provident Resource Group that have all come together for the planning and putting together the financial structure.
And these are kind of conglomerates of nonprofits and government and kind of a cabal of just bad things, it seems.
And Lee's a very smart guy. I mean, he got his undergrad at McAllister. He studied for his MBA at Northwestern. He's been in investment banking his entire life. And after sitting through that session, literally closed his article with the statement, "Is everybody really okay with this?" And he called the structure and the plan not only odd, but wacky. And pointed out that nobody in the public sector would touch this with a 10-foot pole.
And not to put an indictment on Lee, but it's not like the Star-Tribune is a big conservative outlet.
Yeah, exactly.
Or biased outlet.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think, and to his point, in talking with other financial professionals about this issue, because I don't have all the answers. A lot of that's over my head as well at this point, because it's a very convoluted situation. So I've consulted other financial professionals, and they seem to agree with Lee for the most part in that they understand how the city is trying to insulate itself but also there's 10 or 12 or 15 different odd or wacky aspects of this plan that really need to be taken a look at. It's not a responsible way fiscally to set up funding hundreds of millions of dollar water park.
It seems like it's a way to almost launder money to a certain extent, which gives me, and that's not, you're not saying that, I'm saying that it feels like just a very sketchy way to go about this, especially because we do have the Great Wolf Lodge, which is a private water park, again, half a mile away basically, and their business would be impacted by a decision like that.
Absolutely, and kind of for the city to be in competition with a private business that's so close in Bloomington is an issue. And I said jokingly, but almost seriously, we have Valley View, we have the Great Wolf Lodge, we have activity centers here.
We have the Mall of America itself.
Right, we have the Mall of America itself, and I jestingly said to a couple people, how much money do we want to spend on pools this year?
Right.
So,
meanwhile, you look at things like our firehouses, for the fire department, and these are buildings that are becoming dilapidated, and they have their own concerns. It's like, as mayor, it seems like you're going to bring a new prioritization to what we spend money on, right?
Absolutely, it's. To use a football reference, we need to take care of the blocking and tackling that needs to occur within the city, and that includes things like our roads and our fire departments and our schools and our public services and things of that nature, and not focus so much energy and financial resources on what I term as the wants, kind of the ideals. It'd be great to have all these things if we had unlimited money, but the fact is we don't, and all of these things are going to be affecting our property taxes. And even in the last council meeting last week, a couple council members, when talking about the new tax levy for 2020, were very concerned about how much spending is occurring in the city of Bloomington and how many projects they're approving relative to this tax levy that's going to be occurring in 2020.
Which is increasing.
Yes.
Correct? I mean, we are talking about a property tax levy increasing in the city of Bloomington.
Correct. So for those who didn't catch the council meeting, essentially it was a 5-hour council meeting that ended just before midnight, and the crux of the conversation was around the 2020 budget, and the majority of that conversation was around the property tax levy. And the proposed levy was proposed at 6%, which is not much higher than a typical year's increase on a property tax levy.
Did you get a 6% wage increase last year?
We did not. But also, the 6% is a little bit misleading because the council was talking about some quote-unquote one-time budget tricks that were used to even get the proposal down to 6%, and the original proposal was 11%. And a couple of the council members were asking about 2021 and what happens when we don't have these one-time tricks to pull from, and we have to tell the residents of Bloomington that now their property taxes are going to go up by double-digit percentages in 2021.
Which would be devastating for
Devastating.
households.
And it's all because of past decision-making and not having the foresight to say what we're doing right now is going to affect us years down the road.
And I think it's a good sticking point for our audience to know that your opponent has been critical in all of these decisions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has been on the city council making some of these decisions, from the fiscal responsibility aspects to the pet projects to everything that we hear about that is negatively impacting the citizens of Bloomington. It seems to me that he has been part of those decisions.
Yeah, being on the council and obviously having a say in pushing some of these things through, that does fall on my opponent and everybody else on the council, as far as not having that foresight. And now we're seeing the effects of it, the butterfly effect. A couple years later, these are things that they've been talking about for 5-6 years, and now we're in the position where we're paying for it. So that's another key difference between myself and my opponent is I'm used to bootstrapping budgets and making sure that every aspect that the city needs is taken care of before kind of the frivolous spending. I have to do it in my businesses every single day if I want to hire new people and grow and create more opportunities. So I think that's a key difference and a key aspect that will make me successful. And ultimately that rolls down to the citizens of Bloomington when it comes to how affordable it is to live here.
Another key difference and another key issue that gets brought up pretty consistently, especially as of late, that Tim Bussey, your opponent, has been part of, is the issue of organized trash collection. Now in St. Paul, they just had the highest court in Minnesota overturn how they ramrodded against their city charter the ability to actually have a charter amendment voted on and then an actual ballot initiative to say we want organized trash collection, meaning one hauler mandated by the government per area, or we don't. And almost identically, that happened in Bloomington under this city council. It was ramrodded through, and many, many people have been upset about it for the past 3 years. Ryan, how would you as mayor have handled that differently?
Yeah, I know that's been a hot button issue. And I think, number one, to break the rules of the charter is a big no-no. Being a charter city, we have to keep that in mind when we are making these decisions. And no matter which side of the fence you sit on when it comes to the organized collection policy with the single hauler, I think most people can agree that the process was very bad. To your point, it wasn't put on the ballot. The citizens of Bloomington weren't able to give their voice on whether or not this was going to be a yay or a nay, so to speak. And so that's how you do it differently. I mean, you ask. If you have a good idea, it's good to get support from your constituents before pushing an idea through the process without telling anybody. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that issue. And if it does come back to Bloomington to be reevaluated and possibly voted on, I hope it does. I don't know if it'll change anything, and you're sort of stepping back in time when you're doing that. But
you support the idea of having it be put towards a vote because the citizens followed the process.
Absolutely. I think that's how it should have been done from the get-go. And again, it's a symptom of a bigger issue and a recurring theme that goes on in the city. And so we can't set that precedence that the city can operate like that. We need to do things more responsibly in the future. One
of the issues that got brought up, and has been brought up at least from your last conversation that we had, is about the RVs and driveways issue that's happening. What is that, and why are people upset about that?
Yeah, it's another issue that in Bloomington, a lot of people have boats, RVs, toys, so to speak. It's part of our culture as Minnesotans. And it's just another area where the city government is overreaching, in my opinion, and putting too much regulation on the people that live here. Similarly to the hands off our cans or the organized collection, it's one of those things that just sort of popped up, and all of a sudden it was done. In speaking with some council members, it sounds like it's going to be readdressed. But again, we're going back in time to readdress something that should have been handled far differently from the get-go.
Yes, and within that, it's again symptomatic of how Bloomington government has operated, to your point, where there are things that are being talked at citizens versus listened to citizens, and that seems to be symptomatic of a government here in Bloomington for the past, call it 20 years. It's been kind of a disturbing trend. One other very disturbing thing that our viewers may not know about that we talked about before the show was this C.O.V.E.R program. Can you describe to us what that is, how it got implemented, and what the city is set out to do with this crazy program?
Yeah, I brought it up in my closing statements in the forum last night, and I heard gasps from the audience because nobody knew what this was. And I still really don't even know what it is. And a lot of the council members didn't know what it was.
When they voted on it, presumably.
Presumably it was voted on. But in having conversations, nobody really knew what it was. But what I found out through research is that it's essentially an open, anonymous helpline that anybody can call and report somebody who might be mentally ill or who might be aggressive or showing extreme or violent behavior. And I think it's actually called crisis or violent extremist reporting. That's what C.O.V.E.R stands for, C.O.V.E.R. So my questions are, how did this just pop up? Once again, another issue that just popped up. And number two, who vets who vets these calls,
right?
And how are they followed up on, and who handles this information? It just seems like it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to be popping up these things all over the place, and then broadcasting them on the City of Bloomington website and on social media without anybody even knowing what it is.
Oh, yeah, that is disturbing. And the standard there, who gets to determine who is a dangerous individual? One of the things that is a pillar of your campaign, Ryan, is this concept of affordable living, not affordable housing, which seems to be what everybody talks about. How is your plan different than any other politician's plan who talks about affordable housing at the city level? You hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And mainly politicians reference affordable housing as in subsidized housing, higher density housing, more apartment complexes. But you've talked about affordable living as a more holistic way of getting to a place and making Bloomington better. What is affordable living, according to Ryan Kulka?
Yep. Affordable living, in my book, is the more overarching term that looks at the holistic picture of making a city an affordable place to exist, not just live. So affordable housing is a piece of that equation, but it's not the totality of it. Okay, so when I think about affordable living, it's cost of living, it's cost of home prices or home property values, rent, where's your rent? Is it affordable for businesses to exist here? How are we regulating and taxing businesses so that it's attractive for businesses to set footholds here? And obviously, the large percentage of the city budget comes from property taxes, and all of the spending that occurs, all the output from the city affects how affordable our city is to live in. As we alluded to before, we can't be going out when our in is pretty fixed.
Right.
Bloomington's a developed city, and unless we put up a lot more high density and things of this nature and grow the population to a point where I don't know if our city can handle, adding 40,000 people by 2040, which is in the 2040 comp plan, to develop all of these affordable housing and high density units. I don't know if that's sustainable. I don't think it is, but we need to make it easier for businesses to exist here, keep more of our tax dollars within our city. I personally want to lobby to help with the fiscal disparity pool because Bloomington loses out on that every single year. And doing some of these things will help make our city as a whole a more affordable place to exist, not just live with four walls and a roof. It's
not just addressing the problem of affordable housing by throwing more money at it. It is actually taking a snapshot look at what is everything that we're doing from a city level to make it, like you say, more affordable, and I would say more enjoyable, right, to live. You running a couple of businesses here in the city of Bloomington, Ryan, what are some kind of specific things that you find challenging about being a business owner here that can be improved upon if you're mayor or if the city council changes direction?
I've spoken with a lot of fellow business owners in the city of Bloomington. I just had 2 meetings today with 2 different businesses, in fact. And I just keep hearing stories, story after story about little things, meddling for meddling's sake, pretty much, as far as, high licensing fees, or I wanted to move my sign a couple feet and, I had to get it approved and pay a expensive permit fee, to larger issues of some city officials popped in today and I had to spend $400,000 to build a dumpster garage because my dumpsters couldn't be outside of my building anymore. I heard a horror story about a business that was 75% of the way through building out their space and opening their doors. City was approving everything they were doing all the way up through, and then 3/4 of the way there said, well, actually you have to do this, this, and this to come up to code, and it's going to cost you about $250,000, which almost shut the project down completely. Wow. There's so many examples and horror stories of the city, getting involved and regulating and just making it really hard for businesses to start here, to stay here, to form here. And I think that really needs to change because we need our small business population to be advocating for other businesses to come in here. And that's not the sentiment right now amongst small business owners in Bloomington.
Because as a resident of Bloomington myself, it almost seems like, and this is somewhat indicative, right, of the city of Bloomington. Again, we love living here, but at the same time, if we want to go out to a nice restaurant or have a nice night out on the town, I find my wife and I, at least, we're heading up to Edina. You know, we're going to South Minneapolis. It seems to. There's almost a competitive gap there between what our city has to offer in some cases and what our neighboring cities have to offer. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, totally. You hit the nail right on the head there, and I've heard that from a few people and a lot of people actually now. And don't get me wrong, I don't want this to sound like a trash fest against Bloomington, because I love Bloomington. I wouldn't have been here my whole life. I wouldn't have opened a couple different businesses here. I plan on remaining in the city. I plan on keeping my businesses in the city because I love it here, but we need to make a few tweaks, and we need to kind of go like this as city government when it comes to restricting and regulating small businesses. And I think if we just do that, if we have that mindset, that mind frame, and we actually help small businesses along, imagine that, helping a small business instead of squashing them. I think we could change the tone pretty quickly.
Ryan, with the last couple of minutes that we have in today's program, give us your pitch for the voter in November. Why Ryan Kulka? Why this direction? Why this campaign? Why this year?
Well, number one, it's the transparency piece. We covered a lot about transparency today, and I'm a big advocate of getting the process right from the beginning, and that starts with listening to the people of Bloomington. So that whole mindset will change when I'm mayor. Number two, we talked a lot about being financially responsible. Bloomington needs somebody sitting in the seat as mayor that can ask the proper questions, that can analyze the budget and the books to the extent of knowing what to ask and figuring out how to fix the financial situation and being able to analyze what projects warrant what dollars, and being more financially responsible with our city's tax dollars as well. We don't want to drive people out of our city by increasing property taxes every single year. We want to steady that ship. So the financial responsibility aspect is huge. And then to the last topic, affordable living. If we do a lot of things right, and if we focus, and if we get affordable housing right, if we make Bloomington more open for business again, if we stop with the exorbitant spending, and if we start promoting our city services, and we start growing the community here, we can keep more of our tax dollars here. We can make it more affordable for everyone to live.
Ryan, how can people find out more about your campaign and help you out?
Yes. So visit my website, www.kulka4mayor.com. On my website, you can request a lawn sign. We still have over a month and a half left in this election, so definitely get a lawn sign. Make a campaign donation. This is an expensive endeavor, and we want to make a big impact. So definitely financial support is helpful, but also just spreading the word. Votes are what count. We want to increase the voter turnout here in this election, and so talking to your neighbors, spreading the word, getting out in the community, that's what I really ask from everybody.
Very good, and I believe early voting starts next week. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on the Republican Roundtable.
Thanks, Max.
This has been the Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. Until next time.